I'm Starborn. Remember, to be a star, you have to shine your own light, follow your own path, and not worry about the darkness, because that's when stars shine brightest. If you've been looking at our website, starborninstitute.org, you would know that the title of tonight's show is A Bumpy Ride. And that's because at the start of every year, I do 2 shows that actually cover events for the whole year instead of just for 1 week. And so tonight's show is going to cover the eclipses and the new moons for all of 2020. And next week's show will cover the sun sign predictions for all 12 sun signs for 2020 as well. And so there are a couple of reasons why we're going to be undergoing a bumpy ride this year. And I think in a broad sense, we should all be aware of what's happening. The first thing is that there are 3 eclipses, a triple eclipse, that are occurring this year. A triple eclipse occurs when there are 3 eclipses that occur, one right after the other, and they're all 2 weeks apart. And that occurs in June and July. In years when there are triple eclipses, it indicates great social unrest and change, and that can be anywhere in the world. So we need to be aware that that can be happening. And then some planets are changing signs, and we have to be aware of what happens when they do that. For instance, between the middle of March and the end of May, Saturn actually leaves Capricorn and it goes into Aquarius, the sign of the future, and Mars is joining it there. Aquarius is a fixed sign, and Saturn and Mars are 2 malefic planets, and they are then going to be squaring the 3rd malefic planet, Uranus, in Taurus. So between the middle of March and the end of May, we are entering a dangerous time. And that is because Taurus is a financial sign, but Aquarius does rule the future and a lot of other things as well. So I'll be able to describe the danger that can come from that. And that is not a good time between the middle of March and end of May for you to be flying, for instance. But it can also represent a danger in a lot of different ways. And then at the end of in the middle of the summer, by the end of June, Mars changes. It goes into Aries. It's traveled through Aquarius and Pisces, and it goes into Aries, a sign that it rules, and Aries rules new beginnings. And it stays in Aries for the whole rest of the year. So the last 6 months are Mars in Aries, and the problem from that is that it will be continually squared by very strong planets in Capricorn, because Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto will be in Capricorn in that last half of the year. So that is going to create a lot of problems. And then the last thing that we need to be looking at is that there are 2 major planets that change signs this year permanently, and it doesn't happen until December. They are Saturn and Jupiter, which will leave Capricorn in December, about the middle of December, and they'll both go into Aquarius and stay for quite a while. Jupiter will stay for a year, and Saturn will stay for 2 or 3 years. So briefly, that is what we have to look forward to, this idea that, oh boy, there could be some pretty good reasons why we're going to have a bumpy ride this year. And in fact, it starts right away, because in January, we have the first of 6 eclipses that occur this year. 4 of them will be they'll be lunar eclipses, and that's what's happening on January 10th. There is a lunar eclipse at 20 degrees of Cancer. The sign of Cancer gets a lot of attention this year, and Cancer rules not only America and Canada, but it rules women and our feelings and our emotions and our homes and our families. And so there can be a lot of change among women or involving women's interests this year, because there are 4 lunar eclipses. So this first eclipse in January at 20 degrees of Cancer indicates that there can be a woman, since in a lunar eclipse, it generally means that one woman goes and another woman comes. It's not at the same time, but that's what it generally means. And the effect of eclipses lasts for 6 months. So it could happen any time in that time frame. So somewhere around early January, within, say, by next week or so, one woman could be deciding that it's time for her to go. And so she may decide, due to business pressures or due to some sort of pressures involving government agencies, that it's time for her to step down. So she decides to do that. There will be a replacement at a later time, but that could be happening early in January. And then 2 weeks later, there is a new moon. On January 24th, there is a new moon at 4 degrees of Aquarius. And remember, Aquarius rules the future. And so this is a time when there can be a lot of concentration on the future, but the sun and that new moon in Aquarius are squaring Uranus in Taurus. And that can simply mean that there can be some money problems around and that costs could rise. And that means that taxes could rise. Or it can be that some people who had been investing heavily may have made some mistakes, and those mistakes could be very expensive, and they might be finding that out right about then as well. Okay, what does it mean in February? Well, on February 23rd, there is a new moon at 4 degrees of Pisces. And it's a little bit like 4 and 4 add up to 8. And that's because there are 4 planets in Pisces. The Sun, New Moon, Mercury, and Neptune, the ruler of the sign, are all there. And they are wonderfully sextiled by 4 planets in Capricorn: Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, and Mars, which has now gone into Capricorn. Oh boy, it's lucky that they're being supportive of that new moon in Pisces, because Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, Mars is exalted there. And so that simply means that since Pisces rules things behind the scenes, that there may have been some behind the scenes negotiations in small, quiet ways that could now result in a very big deal. And it would be very profitable for a long time to come. So it's a deal with a large corporation or even with a whole government. Maybe it's between governments, but it could work out very well for a long time to come, which would be the result of the work that had been going on behind the scenes for a while, which could be good for all of us. Then what does it mean in March? Well, on March 24th, there is a new moon at 4 degrees of Aries. And this is a time that we're coming into that can be dangerous. Remember, between the middle of March and the end of May, it can be very dangerous. And so danger is heightened at this time. And that is because that new moon that is in Aries is once again squaring these very strong planets that are in Capricorn, one of which is Aries' own ruler. Remember, it's going to be Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Mars that are in Capricorn at that time, all squaring the Aries new moon. So things can look as if they're going to be profitable because Uranus and Venus will be in Taurus right ahead of that new moon. So some new beginning could really be looking great. However, the problem is that people can be sort of jumping the gun. They can be in a rush to get into something that is actually probably going to get stopped in one way or another unless everything is done correctly. So a new beginning may not get off the ground at that time, and we'll just sort of have to live with it. But it's also the timing of the new moon. Remember, it's getting close to the end of March, and within a week after that new moon, in other words, closer to the end of March, the new moon is March 24th, within a week, both Saturn and Mars change and they go into Aquarius and immediately begin to square Uranus and Taurus. So all 3 malefic planets are squaring each other in fixed signs. That's when the bumps are really going to get a little bit heavy. Okay, what does it mean in April? Well, April is the most dangerous month of the whole year, and that is because on April 23rd, there is a new moon at 3 degrees of Taurus. And you know, Taurus is a very strong sign. It's got the sun, the exalted moon, and Mercury there, but they're all coming up against that Saturn and Mars in Aquarius. And so this is a very dangerous time, both physically and financially. And so you have to be very, very careful, because certainly the future can be threatened now. It could be threatened by cyber attacks. It could even be threatened by cyber warfare. And the reason, in other words, somebody shoots up a missile and another person tries to shoot up a missile, and then pretty soon people are going for satellites or electrical grids. That could happen in this very dangerous month of April. So that is a month when you should not be traveling, but particularly not flying, because there could be cyber attacks perhaps on financial institutions, since the new moon is in Taurus, or even on a stock exchange there could be a cyber attack, or there could be something like an airplane disaster or even a spaceship failure at this time. So that's why you need to be super cautious in April. Okay, what does it mean in May? Well, on May 22nd, there is a new moon at 2 degrees of Gemini. And boy, things are looking pretty hopeful right now, because there are 5 planets in the air signs. There is the Sun, the new moon, Mercury, and let's see what else. I think Venus in Gemini at that time, and they are all trining that Saturn in Aquarius. Mars has moved on, but Saturn is still in Aquarius. And so those 5 planets in the air signs make it possible for some sort of temporary solution, or sort of a trial period for something that could offer a solution to a problem. But the real problem is that they can offer a solution, or somebody can float a pretty good idea right now, even if it's just a temporary one that others can agree to. But it's about a sad and delayed future. And the reason why is that when Saturn is in Aquarius, which rules the future, Saturn is a planet of delay. And so even with some good temporary idea, it's going to be about something that either has already been delayed or is about to be delayed. So it may not get you too far, but still there is a good possibility. Okay, what does it mean in June? Well, in June, we come into this period of time in the summer when the triple eclipses hit. And they, remember, denote great social unrest and change. So on June 5th, the first eclipse occurs. It's a lunar eclipse. Remember, there's 4 of them this year. And that lunar eclipse is at 16 degrees of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius rules long-distance travel and people from foreign countries. And it is a sort of a high-minded sign. But that full moon, once again, means that one woman goes and another woman comes. So that's sort of possible at this time. It also means that there's the possibility that something that had been going on for a while is stopped or deferred in one way, or postponed in one way or another. And the reason why is that that lunar eclipse in Sagittarius is squaring Mars, which has now moved into Pisces, and Neptune in Pisces. So there's sort of like anybody who has been trying to hide, great harm could come to people who have been trying to hide Mars in Pisces, because Pisces rules areas of confinement. Mars is not happy in Pisces, but those planets are squaring the full moon. So it looks to me like something that could work out, or has the potential to work out, is once again going to be delayed in one way or another. And great harm will come to anybody who's trying to hide anything at that moment or at that period of time. So I hope they don't. And then 2 weeks later, on June 21st, there is a solar eclipse. And this solar eclipse is at 0 degrees of Cancer. And that simply means that when something happens at 0 degrees of a sign regarding the moon and the sun, it means that there's going to be a second new moon in Cancer later in the following month. And that is what's going to be happening. So on June 21st, the solar eclipse at 0 degrees of Cancer can indicate, once again, that there can be a new beginning for something that involves women. So women's issues are going to go through change or moderation or adaptation this year. And that could provide a bumpy ride for some people, depending on whether they agree or disagree with those issues. But also, it simply means that It can be a new beginning for America. It can look very hopeful, but that solar eclipse is coming up against powerful planets in Capricorn. Saturn has gone back into, no, it hasn't yet. The planets in Capricorn are Jupiter and Pluto at that time, and they will be opposing this solar eclipse in Cancer. So it can look as if our feelings or our country are engaged in something that can be very hopeful, but at the same time with the strength in Capricorn, which is being fortified by Uranus and Taurus all year, remember that, it can be that business interests want to make some important change for their benefit, not for the benefit of the country, but they are not able to do that at this time. But they could keep trying at a later time. What does it mean in July? Well, in July, we get another eclipse, the third one, and it's a lunar eclipse once again. So one woman goes and another woman comes, and this lunar eclipse on July 5th is at 14 degrees of Capricorn. Capricorn does represent experience and things that are done or rewarded for hard work over a long period of time. So since this involves one woman going and another woman coming, there is the possibility that an older woman at this time, around the beginning of July, would want to make a new beginning, and she may want to resume a former high position that she had in the past. And so as the new beginning goes forward, it may be threatened by something, and because her new beginning is threatened, it could falter, and there is no real assurance that she is going to be able to resume her former position. And that is because that new beginning in one way or another that she's associated with comes under attack. And so it's sort of up in the air as to whether that succeeds or not at that time. And then 2 weeks later, on July 20th, there is a new moon. And it is in Cancer at 28 degrees of Cancer. It's the second new moon. Remember, the first one was the solar eclipse in June. And so in this particular new moon in Cancer, once again, a new moon or a solar eclipse always denotes new beginnings. And so there can be a resumption of some sort of new beginning for our country, or it can be for issues that involve women in one way or another, or our homes, or real estate transactions, anything that Cancer rules. So that can work out well as long as we are holding to the principles that Cancer represents, rather than adhering to the planets that are opposing the sign of Cancer. Because remember, Saturn will have gone back into Capricorn, so it will be Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn, continually opposing the sign of Cancer. And also, by this time, Mars has moved into Aries, where it's going to stay for 6 months. And so Mars in Aries will be squaring this new moon in Cancer as well. So there could be a little rough water or a bump in the road there, because people will not agree about a new beginning, because it won't be completely on everyone's terms. It won't be satisfactory to that. Okay, what does it mean in August? Well, on August 19th, there is a new moon at 27 degrees of Leo. Well, Leo rules horse racing. And so it can be that somebody can be sort of off to the races right now. It could be a person or it could be a group. And what they want to do is they really want to come home to achieving success in their own goal. And since Leo rules gambling, they're willing to take any gamble in order to cross the finish line first. So they would be up to anything to do that. And that could be pretty fascinating to watch. And that is because if they're willing to do anything to cross the finish line first, it could be that they could be doing all kinds of things, illegal and illegal. So we would need to be careful now. That really isn't, Leo does rule gambling, but that is not a particularly good time to take a gamble. And the reason why is that Mars in Aries is trining that new moon in Leo, and everyone can just surge forward too fast and perhaps make some expensive errors. And those expensive errors could really cost them money because Uranus in Taurus is going to be squaring this new moon. Okay, what does it mean in September? Well, on September 17th, there is a new moon at 25 degrees of Virgo. And this is a great new moon because there are 6 planets that are trining each other in the Earth signs. Not only are the Sun and new moon in Virgo, but Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto are in Capricorn trining it, and so is Uranus in Taurus. Well, Virgo rules good problem solving, and it rules service to others, and it can rule accountability and also the healthcare field. And this is a time when a very simple, logical solution can be presented. And it can be so astoundingly simple that you and everybody else can be saying, oh, why didn't I think of that? So people can really be in agreement about a simple solution to something, so that's great. However, there are going to be too many people that want to talk about problems from the past that are associated with a simple solution, and that is why it may not succeed. Because you've got to get it sort of over that finish line. You've got to all agree and go forward and actually apply a simple solution. And that may not occur quickly enough because too many people are talking about past problems instead, which is a shame. Okay, what does it mean in October? Well, in October, remember, there is a new moon on October 16th at 24 degrees of Libra. Well, Libra is the traditional ruler of the 7th house of love and marriage and peace and partnership and the law. And that is absolutely going to be impossible in October. Remember I said it's going to be a bumpy ride this year. Well, you're going to get your share of bumps in October because all of the planets in Libra are going to be opposed by that aggressive Mars in Aries, and they are also going to be squared by that Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto in Capricorn. So there's going to be an awful lot of argument instead. No peacemaking at all in October. And in fact, one word can describe the month of October, and that is fireworks. So there's going to be plenty of fireworks and no agreement or compromise at all. But that's the way it goes. What does it mean in November? Well, on November 15th, there is a new moon at 23 degrees of Scorpio. And Scorpio is a fixed financial sign. And while it is opposing Uranus in Taurus, the other fixed financial sign, that Uranus is being beautifully backed up all year by the planets in Capricorn, which are very good. And the new moon in Scorpio is being backed up by that Neptune in Pisces. They're both strong and they both have support. And what does that mean? It means that in November there is plenty of money around, a lot of money, because the planets in fixed signs are well fortified. And so there can be some sort of, certainly an agreement about a big deal that is coming through, or money that it comes out of somebody's pocket or somebody's budget from or for a corporate deal that is huge, or for money for a government program of some sort. But it's going to work because there is so much money around, and that will be great. And then we come in to the winter eclipses that are occurring early this year, because 2 weeks later, on November 30th, right after Thanksgiving, there is a lunar eclipse, the last one of the year, at 9 degrees of Gemini. And remember, once again, throughout all 4 lunar eclipses this year, it means one woman goes and another woman comes, because it's the moon that's being eclipsed and the moon rules women. But it's at 9 degrees of Gemini. And so there is the possibility at this time that there can be some sort of temporary solution that is made, or some suggestion of how to, almost like a stopgap program where, okay, they don't have the final solution to something, but why not try this? Why not try something that can work? And so there is the possibility that that can be presented. Now, it might not work depending on how people react to it. So at least somebody could give it a try, which would be good. And that is because we're nearing the end of the year, and by the month of November, there's only one retrograde planet. But during the summer, when there's all those eclipses going on, there are as many as 4 retrograde planets, and retrograde planets slow things down. But by November, some idea that might have been floated before can sort of get off the ground a little bit, and people can say, well, okay, maybe we should try this out. And so there is a possibility of success for that. Okay, what does it mean in December? Well, in December, we have another eclipse. It's a solar eclipse on December 14th at 23 degrees of Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is a very high-minded sign. It rules religion and philosophy, and it rules foreign countries and people from foreign countries. It rules international organizations and the high courts. And so this can be a time around the middle of December, which is about the same time that 2 major planets change signs. Jupiter and Saturn both leave Capricorn and go into Aquarius, the sign of the future, in the middle of December. And this solar eclipse in Sagittarius can represent some sort of worldly or universal proposal or resolution that people would be willing to consider. And it could be a pretty broad-minded one, but they could be willing to consider it, and it may involve people from foreign countries. And as they're considering it, I think that it could actually be passed, or could be, could certainly be something that we could all agree to, because it's going to involve some sort of expansion, and at the same time, it's going to involve some sort of restriction. And so, you know, if you're having an expansion and a restriction, it means that people that want one or the other can both be happy. Maybe that's why that could possibly succeed at that time, because it's a solar eclipse. And remember, solar eclipses denote new beginnings. So we may have a hopeful new beginning at the end of the year by the time we get through taking a really bumpy ride through 2020. All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, you can see the show, read our blog, and hear our podcast on our website, starborninstitute.org.